The silver spacecraft drifted through the empty void between stars, its hull scarred and blackened from countless battles. Inside the cramped command center, High Counselor Veltar stared at the star charts with tired golden eyes. His reptilian hands shook as he traced the red marks spreading across the galactic map like a deadly disease. "Another system has gone dark," reported his aide, a young Zephyrian named Colin. The younger alien's voice cracked with fear. "The Kepler-7 colonies, 3 billion souls, gone in 2 days." Veltar closed his eyes and felt the weight of his entire species pressing down on his shoulders. For 6 months, the Devourers had swept across the galaxy like hungry shadows, consuming everything in their path. Worlds that had stood for thousands of years were reduced to empty husks in mere hours. No diplomacy worked. No weapon could stop them. No alliance had proven strong enough. The Zephyrian Collective had tried everything. They had called upon the mighty Corvin Empire with their massive battle fleets. Even their legendary warriors fell before the Devourer swarms. The ancient telepathic council had attempted to reason with the enemy minds, only to have their own consciousness torn apart by the alien hunger. 7 different species had joined forces, pooling their best technology and bravest soldiers, yet still the red tide advanced. "Hi, Counselor," Colin said softly. "The Emergency Council is asking for your decision. Should we evacuate the remaining populations to the Outer Rim worlds? And delay the inevitable by what, a few weeks?" Veltar's voice was bitter. Had seen the projections. Even if they moved every civilian to the farthest corners of known space, the Devourers would find them. They always found them. The enemy seemed to smell life itself across the vast distances between stars. The command center fell silent, except for the steady hum of life support systems. Outside the viewport, distant stars twinkled peacefully, unaware that an unstoppable force was racing toward them at impossible speeds. Veltar wondered how many of those lights would be extinguished before this nightmare ended. "Sir," a technician called from the communications station. "We are receiving the daily reports from our scout ships." The alien's voice was hollow. "Sector 7, gone. Sector 12, no response. The refugee fleets from the Antares colonies." He paused, unable to continue. "Tell me," Veltar commanded, though he already knew what the report would contain. "Destroyed, sir. All hands lost." Veltar gripped the edge of his command console until his claws left scratches in the metal. Somewhere in the galaxy, the Devourers were feeding on the remains of another civilization, growing stronger with each world they consumed. The enemy ships multiplied with every victory, their dark hulls built from the bones of dead planets. "High Counselor," Colin whispered, "there is one option we have not tried." "What option?" Veltar snapped. "We have contacted every major power in the galaxy. The Stellar Federation won't answer our calls. The Trade Consortium cares only for profit. Even the machine worlds have gone silent, probably calculating that cooperation with us is not cost-effective." "It's not the major powers, sir." Colin activated a small holographic display showing a section of the galaxy that most civilizations ignored, the Outer Rim. There are some newly discovered species there. Primitive races that have only recently achieved faster-than-light communication. Veltar stared at the display with disbelief. "You want us to ask savages for help? Species that probably still fight with chemical explosives and metal projectiles? What choice do we have?" Colin's voice grew stronger. "The advanced civilizations have failed us. Maybe someone with a different perspective, someone who thinks differently about warfare." "This is madness," Veltar muttered, but he found himself leaning closer to the display. One particular star system caught his attention. The intelligence reports were sparse, but they mentioned a species called humans from a world called Earth. Recent first contact protocols suggested they were aggressive, unpredictable, and surprisingly resourceful for such a young civilization. "They will laugh at us," Veltar said. "Or worse, they will simply ignore our transmission." "Why would primitives risk their lives for strangers on the other side of the galaxy?" "Because," Colin replied quietly, "sometimes those who have the least to give are the most willing to give it." Veltar looked around the command center at his exhausted crew. These were the last military officers of a once-proud confederation that ruled star systems when Earth's sun was still young. They were reduced to begging unknown aliens for scraps of help. "Prepare the emergency transmission," he ordered. "Finally, address it to the human government on Earth. Tell them who we are, what threatens us, and ask for whatever aid they can spare. A few supply ships, some weapons, perhaps a small escort fleet, if they are feeling generous." As his communications officer began composing the message, Veltar allowed himself one small hope. Maybe these humans would surprise him. Maybe they would send a token force that could buy the Zephyrians a few more precious weeks to find a real solution. He had no way of knowing that he had just contacted the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The emergency alarm echoed through the halls of the Global Defense Assembly as Admiral June walked quickly toward the main conference room. Her black uniform was still wrinkled from sleep, but her dark eyes were sharp and focused. At 3 a.m., the morning emergency calls usually meant one of two things. Either Earth was under attack, or something had gone very wrong in the outer colonies. She pushed open the heavy doors to find the circular chamber already filled with worried faces. President Kim sat at the central table, his usually calm expression replaced by something between excitement and terror. Defense Minister Tae was studying holographic displays that showed star charts Admiral June had never seen before. "Admiral," President Kim said as she entered, "we have a situation that requires your immediate attention." "Sir?" Admiral June took her seat and noticed that every screen in the room was displaying the same image, a golden-scaled alien face with large, desperate eyes. "First contact," Minister Tae said simply, "and they are asking for our help." The alien recording began to play, and Admiral June listened in growing amazement as High Counselor Veltar explained the situation. Billions of lives lost, entire civilizations consumed. An unstoppable enemy sweeping across the galaxy like a plague. Zephyrian's translator struggled with human languages, but the message was clear. They were dying, and they needed help. "What exactly are they asking for?" Admiral June asked when the recording ended. "Not much," replied General Park, the head of military intelligence. "Some supplies, basic weapons, maybe a few escort ships. They seem to think we are just another minor species that might spare them some scraps." Admiral June studied the tactical data that accompanied the alien message. The enemy called themselves the Devourers, and their advancement pattern showed a terrifying efficiency. They moved from system to system like hungry animals, leaving nothing but empty planets behind. "These Devourers," she said slowly. "How many ships are we talking about?" "Intelligence estimates suggest several thousand vessels in their main fleet," General Park replied. "They seem to reproduce their ships using materials from consumed worlds. And the Zephyrians expect us to help with a few cargo ships and some fighter escorts." Admiral June almost smiled. "They really have no idea who they just contacted." President Kim leaned forward. "Admiral, I want your honest assessment. Can we help them?" Admiral June was quiet for a long moment, studying the data. The Devourers were clearly powerful, but their tactics seemed to rely on overwhelming force and psychological terror. They had been fighting civilizations that tried to negotiate or defend passively. "Sir," she said finally, "I don't think the question is whether we can help them. I think the question is whether we should deploy the full Terran Expeditionary Force." The room fell silent. The Terran Expeditionary Force was humanity's ultimate military response, reserved for threats to Earth itself. It had never been deployed outside the solar system. "You want to send our entire deep space fleet to help complete strangers?" Minister Tae asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Minister Admiral June replied, "Humanity spent centuries learning a very important lesson. Evil wins when good people choose to do nothing. These aliens came to us for help. That makes them our responsibility." As General Park activated another display showing Earth's military assets. The full fleet would mean over 1,000 ships.
Dreadnoughts.
Carriers, destroyer squadrons, marine assault craft, support vessels. We would be committing everything. And if we lose, President Kim asked quietly. Admiral June stood and walked to the large viewport that showed Earth spinning peacefully below. "If We lose fighting to save innocent lives, then we lose as humans should lose. But sir, I don't think we are going to lose. Return back to face the assembly. The Devourers have been fighting civilizations that approach warfare like a chess game. Careful moves, defensive strategies, attempting to minimize losses. They have never fought a species that approaches war like humans do, which is, Minister, Tay asked. Total war. Complete victory. We don't fight to survive or to defend. We fight to win. And we use every tool, every weapon, every advantage to make sure the enemy can never threaten anyone again. President Kim studied the Admiral's face. You really think we can defeat an enemy that has destroyed dozens of advanced civilizations? Sir, those civilizations tried to fight the Devourers using conventional military thinking. They met force with force, ship with ship. But humans learned something during our own wars that these aliens apparently never learned. What's that? Admiral June smiled, and there was something cold and dangerous in her expression. The best way to defeat an enemy is not to fight them the way they expect to be fought. It's to fight them in ways they have never imagined. Within an hour, the vote was unanimous. Earth would deploy the Terran Expeditionary Force to assist the Zephyrian Collective. Across the solar system, shipyards began emergency production protocols. Civilian cargo vessels were converted to military transports. Factories that had been producing consumer goods switched to manufacturing weapons and armor in the recruitment centers. Volunteers lined up by the thousands. Young officers like Captain Rin reported for duty with excitement in their eyes. Veteran Marines like Commander Dong requested transfers to the Expeditionary Force. The Zephyrians had asked for a few ships and some supplies. Instead, they were about to receive something they had never seen before: humanity at war. Fighting not for conquest or resources, but for the simple reason that it was the right thing to do. High Counselor Veltar would soon learn that when humans decide to help, they don't do anything halfway. The orbital sensors around the Zephyrian homeworld began screaming warnings 3 hours before the human fleet arrived. High Counselor Veltar rushed to the monitoring station, his golden scales reflecting the flashing red lights that filled the command center. "What is happening?" he demanded, still pulling on his ceremonial robes. "Are we under attack?" "No, sir," replied the sensor operator, a young Zephyrian named Melon, whose hands shook as she worked the controls. "We are detecting hyperspace signatures. Many signatures. The humans." Veltar felt his heart racing. "How many ships are they sending?" Malin stared at her readings in disbelief. "The computers must be malfunctioning.
Ow!
The numbers don't make sense." "Tell me what you see," Veltar ordered, moving closer to the display screens. "The signatures suggest over 1,000 vessels, sir. But that can't be right. We only asked for a few supply ships." Before Veltar could respond, space itself seemed to tear open. Brilliant flashes of light marked exit points from hyperspace as ship after ship emerged from the quantum foam. First came the smaller vessels, destroyers and frigates that dwarfed most Zephyrian warships. Then came the cruisers, their sleek hulls bristling with weapons that no Zephyrian had ever seen before. But it was the appearance of the dreadnoughts that made Veltar's legs give out. Massive ships longer than Zephyrian cities, their armor plating dark as space itself, emerged one by one until 12 of the giant vessels hung in formation around the planet. "Blessed ancestors," whispered Colin, who had arrived to find his superior collapsed in a chair. "What have we done?" The human fleet continued to arrive for another hour. Carrier groups with fighter craft that moved like angry insects. Transport. Ships that could carry entire armies. Supply vessels bigger than space stations. And at the center of it all, a flagship that made even the dreadnoughts look small. Malin called out, her voice barely above a whisper, "We are receiving a transmission from the human fleet commander." The main screen flickered and showed the face of a human woman with short black hair and calm dark eyes. She wore a military uniform that was simple, but somehow suggested great authority. "High Counselor Veltar," the human said in perfect Zephyrian. "Language: I am Admiral June of the Terran Expeditionary Force. We received your request for assistance." Veltar tried to speak, but found his throat too dry. Behind the Admiral, he could see the bridge of her ship, humans working at stations with quiet efficiency. Their faces serious but not afraid. Veltar finally managed, "We are grateful for your response, but I think there has been some mistake. We asked for limited assistance, a few supply ships." Admiral June's expression didn't change. "There was no mistake, High Counselor. You asked Earth for help against an enemy that threatens innocent lives. This is how humans respond to such requests." "But you brought over 1,000 ships," Veltar protested. "Your entire military must be here." "Not our entire military, Admiral," June replied calmly. "Just the expeditionary force. We still have defense fleets protecting our own worlds." Colin stepped forward. "Admiral, with respect, the enemy you will face has destroyed civilizations far more advanced than ours. They have weapons and tactics that have defeated every alliance in the galaxy." "We understand," Admiral June said. "We have studied the battlefield recordings you provided. We'd like to meet with your military leaders to discuss strategy." Within hours, Veltar found himself in a conference room aboard the human flagship, surrounded by officers whose casual confidence was deeply unsettling. Admiral June sat across from him, flanked by Captain Hune, tactical specialist with sharp eyes, and Commander Dong, who looked like he could tear apart a battle mech with his bare hands. "The Devourers rely on 3 primary advantages, Captain," Hune explained, projecting holographic battle scenes into the air: numerical superiority, psychological terror, and their hive mind coordination. Previous opponents have tried to match them ship for ship. "That approach clearly failed," Commander Dong added, studying footage of Devourer attacks. "They expect their enemies to fight defensively, to try to minimize losses while hoping for rescue." Veltar watched the humans analyze battle data with the same casual interest that Zephyrians might discuss weather patterns. "What will you do differently?" Admiral June leaned forward. "We won't fight them ship to ship. We'll fight them human to human." "I don't understand," Veltar said. "Devourers have a hive mind," Captain Hain explained. "They think as one entity. That's their strength, but it's also their weakness." Commander Dong activated another display showing strange human weapons. "We've spent the last week developing specialized equipment based on your battle data. Cyber. Warfare packages, neural disruption fields, and biological agents designed to attack their collective consciousness." "You're going to try to break their minds?" Colin asked in horror. "We're going to succeed," Admiral June replied matter-of-factly. "Humans have been fighting psychological warfare for thousands of years. We know exactly how to turn someone's greatest strength into their greatest weakness." Veltar felt a chill run through his scales. "Admiral, are you certain you can defeat them?" Admiral June's smile was cold and confident. "High Counselor, you asked for our help. What you're about to see is why other species call humans when they need something destroyed completely." As the meeting ended, Veltar realized that the Zephyrians had not just asked for military assistance. They had unleashed something that the galaxy had never seen before: humanity at war. Fighting not for territory or resources, but for the simple principle that evil should not be allowed to win. The Devourers were about to learn why that made humans the most dangerous species in the universe. The Devourer fleet emerged from dark space like a nightmare made real. Thousands of biomechanical ships stretched across the starfield, their hulls built from the bones of dead worlds and powered by the consumed life force of entire civilizations. Each vessel pulsed with a sickly green light that seemed to drain the warmth from nearby stars. High Admiral Zekthal stood at the center of the massive command ship, his consciousness linked to every vessel in the fleet through the hive mind that had made the Devourers unstoppable. Through 10,000 eyes, he saw the Kepler's Edge system spread before them, another collection of worlds. Ready for harvest? But something was wrong. Instead of the usual terrified defense fleets scrambling to escape, Zekthal found himself looking at something he had never encountered before. Over 1,000 ships waited in perfect battle formation, their hulls gleaming with weapons that hurt to look at directly. At the center of the formation sat a massive flagship that seemed to radiate confidence instead of fear. "Unknown vessels." Came a transmission in the common galactic language. "This is Admiral June of the Terran Expeditionary Force. You are ordered to withdraw from the system immediately." Zekthal felt confusion ripple through the hive mind. No species had ever demanded that the Devourers withdraw. Usually, their enemies begged for mercy or tried to negotiate for the lives of their civilians. "I am High Admiral Zekthal," he replied, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds. "We are the Devourers. We consume all life. Your resistance is meaningless." Admiral June to all ships came the human response, ignoring his threat completely. "Execute Protocol 7. Show them what humans do to bullies." The first wave of human ships simply vanished. Zekthal's sensors showed them one moment, then registered nothing but empty space. Through the hive mind, he felt the confusion of his ship commanders as they tried to target enemies that no longer appeared to exist. Then the attacks began. Captain Minho's stealth destroyer emerged from cloak. Directly behind a Devourer command ship, its plasma cannons tearing through alien armor like paper. Before the enemy could respond, the human ship disappeared again, leaving only wreckage and confusion. Across the battlefield, invisible human vessels struck without warning. Each attack was precisely calculated to cause maximum damage while revealing nothing about human capabilities. The Devourers found themselves fighting ghosts that struck from every direction. "Impossible," Zekthal snarled, his consciousness reaching out through the hive mind to coordinate a response. "Deploy the swarm fighters. Overwhelm them with numbers." Millions of small craft poured from the Devourer ships like angry insects. The biomechanical fighters moved with hive mind precision, creating attack patterns that had destroyed entire defense fleets. But the humans were ready. "All fighter squadrons engage," Admiral June commanded from her flagship. Human pilots and advanced craft met the swarm head-on, but instead of trying to match numbers, they did something the Devourers had never seen before. They fought smart, human. Fighters worked in coordinated groups, each pilot covering the others, while specialized electronic warfare craft jammed the hive mind signals that controlled the enemy swarm. Suddenly, millions of perfectly coordinated fighters became millions of confused individual craft bumping into each other. "Their unity is breaking," reported Captain Bin from his heavy cruiser. "Whatever they're using to coordinate is being disrupted." But the real surprise was yet to come. Commander Dong's marine assault craft punched through the chaos of the space battle, heading directly for the largest Devourer ships. Instead of trying to destroy the enemy vessels, the Marines used specialized boarding pods to penetrate their hulls. "Boarding parties away," Commander Dong reported as his Marines breached the first command ship. "Beginning primary mission." Zekthal felt a new kind of fear as human soldiers appeared inside his ships. But these weren't ordinary Marines trying to capture territory. They moved with deadly purpose toward the bioneural centers that controlled each vessel. "What are they doing?" he demanded, watching through security feeds as humans planted strange devices throughout his ships. The answer came from Chief Engineer Sun, working from the human flagship. "Deploying cognitive viruses," she reported to Admiral June. "The enemy's hive mind is about to experience what humans call a mental breakdown." The devices the Marines had planted weren't weapons in any traditional sense. They were sophisticated programs designed to attack the collective consciousness that made the Devourers so dangerous. Human scientists had spent decades studying how minds could be broken. They had built those techniques into weapons. The effect was immediate and devastating. Zekthal screamed as foreign thoughts invaded the hive mind, instead of perfect unity. He suddenly experienced chaos, confusion, and something the Devourers had never felt before: individual fear. Each ship in the fleet began to act independently, their perfect coordination shattered. "Neural cascade failure detected, Captain," Yoon reported from inside a Devourer ship. "Their collective consciousness is fragmenting." Across the battlefield, the Devourer fleet began to self-destruct. Ships that had worked together for centuries suddenly saw each other as threats. The hive mind that had been their greatest strength became a weapon turned against them as human-designed viruses spread panic and madness through their shared consciousness. "Target their command ships," Admiral June ordered calmly. "End this." The battle that was supposed to determine the fate of the galaxy lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Devourer threat that had terrorized civilizations for centuries was extinct. Not defeated, not retreated, completely destroyed. High Admiral Zekthal's final thought, before the viruses tore his mind apart, was a single word: impossible. But humans had just proven that nothing was impossible when you fought for the right reasons. The silence after the battle was more terrifying than the fighting itself. High Counselor Veltar stood on the observation deck of his flagship, staring at the wreckage field that had once been the unstoppable Devourer fleet. Twisted metal and bioorganic matter drifted through space like the remains of a nightmare. That had finally ended. Status report, he called to his communications officer, though his voice shook with disbelief. Sir, long-range sensors confirmed complete destruction of the enemy fleet. No survivors detected. The Devourer threat has been eliminated. Veltar's legs gave out and he sank into his command chair. For 6 months, the Devourers had swept across the galaxy like a plague, consuming everything in their path. Advanced civilizations with millions of years of history had fallen in days. The greatest military alliances had crumbled before the enemy's advance. And now, in less than a single day, they were gone. Sir, his aide Colin reported, the human fleet is requesting permission to dock. Admiral June wishes to speak with you. An hour later, Veltar found himself in his own conference room, but somehow he felt like a guest in his own ship. Admiral June sat across from him with the same calm expression she had worn during the battle, as if destroying an enemy that had terrified the galaxy was just another day's work. High Counselor, she said. The immediate threat has been eliminated. Our medical teams are ready to assist with any casualties, and our engineers can help repair damaged systems. Admiral Veltar managed. What you did today, ... It should have been impossible. The Devourers defeated civilizations that were far more advanced than humanity. They defeated civilizations that fought like civilizations, Admiral June replied. We fought like humans. Captain Heian, who had been studying battle reports, looked up from his tablet. The enemy's tactics were actually quite predictable once we understood their psychology. They relied on fear and overwhelming force because those methods had always worked before. But they had never fought a species that turns fear into anger, added Commander Dong. Or one that sees overwhelming force as just another problem to solve. Veltar shook his head in confusion. I watched. Your ships during the battle? Your pilots were outnumbered 1,000 to 1, yet they seemed ... excited. Humans like a challenge, Admiral June said simply. The bigger the enemy, the more satisfying it is to bring them down. But why? Veltar asked desperately. Why risk? Everything for strangers you had never met? Your species could have ignored our transmission? You could have stayed safe in your own system? Admiral June was quiet for a moment, looking out through the viewport at the rescue ships that were all ready. Searching for survivors from the few Zephyrian vessels that had been damaged in the battle, human medical teams were working alongside Zephyrian doctors, treating wounded aliens with the same care they would show their own people. High Counselor, she said finally, let me tell you something about humans. We spent thousands of years learning a very hard lesson. We learned that evil wins when good people choose to do nothing. But the cost, Veltar protested. You could have lost everything. And if we had lost while fighting to save innocent lives, we would have lost as humans should lose, Admiral June replied. But we didn't lose because we never planned to lose. Captain Heian activated a holographic display showing the tactical analysis of the battle. The Devourers made a classic mistake. They assumed that because they had defeated every other species, they understood all possible forms of warfare. They never encountered a species that studies its enemies, not to defend against them, but to destroy them completely, Commander Dong added. Is that what humans do? Colin asked quietly. Study how to destroy your enemies? We study how to win, Admiral June corrected. There's a difference. Destruction for its own sake makes you a monster. Destroying monsters to protect innocent people makes you human. Veltar looked around the conference room at these strange aliens who had saved his entire species. Admiral, what happens now? Will you return to your own worlds? Eventually, Admiral June said. But first, we want to make sure this doesn't happen again. We'll help you rebuild your defenses and share some of our technology. Consider it an investment in galactic peace. The Galactic Council has already extended an invitation for humanity to join, Colin reported. They want to know if Earth would be interested in a permanent alliance. Admiral June smiled. We'll consider it. But understand something. If we join your galactic community, it will be as equals, not as subjects. And if anyone threatens our new friends, they'll discover that what happened to the Devourers was just a small sample of what humans can do when we're really angry. 2 weeks later, as the human fleet prepared to return to Earth, Veltar stood in his private quarters composing a message that would be transmitted to every world in the galaxy. The message was simple, but would change everything, to all civilizations. We have found allies among the humans of Earth. They are a young species. But they possess something we had forgotten, the courage to stand against evil no matter the why. Cost. If you face extinction, if darkness threatens your worlds, remember that there are beings in this galaxy who will cross the void itself to stand beside you. The age of fear is over. The age of hope has begun. As Admiral June's flagship jumped to hyperspace carrying news of victory back to Earth, the galaxy was already beginning to change. Word spread quickly that there was now a species that others could call upon when facing the impossible. And in the depths of space, other threats that had been planning their own campaigns of conquest quietly reconsidered their plans. The humans had sent a message that echoed across the stars: evil would no longer go unopposed.